Alright, we are back, and let's go ahead and start by taking this thing offline. So we're going to put it into program mode so our emulator doesn't just keep running in the background. Go offline, and we've set up a scale. That's great. Let's go ahead and delete all of that because we're not going to look at that anymore. We don't really need to. Let's come up here and see what other kinds of fun stuff that we've got. So let's click back into our environment so it'll let us select things up top. We can come over here to bit. You see we've got one shot rising and one shot falling. Let's pull in a one shot. I know it's simple, but it's something that you've really got to use. And let's give this a name of ONS1, and we want to end that with a semicolon. Right click on the ONS1 and create the tag, and you see here it's got a data type of FBD one shot, so that's the one shot from a function block diagram. Let's go ahead and create it, and when we do, we'll click into here, function F1, and pull up our help menu, and dropping down we'll see we've got our operands, we've got our structured text right about there. And aside from the tag, what kind of parameters have we got? We've got an enable in, we've got an input bit. Well, the enable, and pretty much all of these commands are going to have an enable in, but if you look at what the enable in is, you can disable this if you want to, but by default it's set to enable. So there's very rare times that you're going to want to disable one of your blocks, but it's nice to know that it's there just in case. What we really care about here is our input bit. So that's the momentary signal that's going to be coming into our one shot, whether that's a timer done bit or whether that's a push button that somebody's got their finger on for 3 seconds. Whatever the case, that's the Boolean that's going to be coming into our one shot. And again, we can enable our output, but there's really no reason because that's always kind of enabled by default. And then we've got our output bit. So that's really what we're concerned with. That's our momentary signal coming out. So if we go in and set one of these things up, and I don't think we really need to go through all that, but we're going to declare our one shot like we already have. Then we're also going to have our ONS1, which is our tag name, dot enable in. And then we're going to have our ONS1, which is our tag name, dot input bit, colon, equals, and then we're going to set that equal to whatever the tag is where our momentary signal is. So, again, maybe that's push underscore BTN, push button. And then for our output bit, that's going to, let's pretend that it triggers a pump and starts, makes the pump start running. So then we're going to have pump underscore trigger colon equals ONS1 dot output bit. So that's basically all there is to setting up a one shot. I'll go ahead and type out the next one just so I'm not just sitting here reciting all of this stuff off the top of my head. We've got timers. Timers also require a good bit of setup. We've got our math blocks, we've got moves, we have got trigonometry, we've got basically all the same stuff that we had before whenever we were looking at function blocks, only, difference being that now we actually have to type all this out. Let's go into our alarms because those are actually fairly complex. And let's go ahead and set one of those up and make it work, just because it'll be painful. So I'm going to go ahead and take an analog, actually, yeah, I'll take an analog alarm. Why not? We're going to really suffer for this one. So what have we got? The first thing that we've got here is we've got our tag, then we've got our in signal, then we've got our program acknowledge all bit, then we've got our program disable bit, then we've got our program enable bit. So right away, just when we're declaring an analog alarm object, we already have to set up quite a bit of things. So let's go ahead and do that. This is going to be, let's just pretend we're talking about level. So this will be level underscore ALM, comma, And now it's not actually giving us all of our parameters anymore once I started typing, which is, not exactly helpful. So let's go ahead and pull this up. And now we can see we've got our input signal is next. So our input signal is going to be, let's just call that LVL. That'll be our level, comma. The next thing that we need is a program acknowledge all. So we'll call that ALM silence. Good enough. And actually I didn't get the underscore, so let's try that again. Underscore silence. Perfect. Comma. Next thing that we've got is going to be a program disable, so we'll just call that disable, comma. Whoops, I misspelled disable too. And the last thing we've got is a program enable, so we'll just call that enable. And we can semicolon that, and then we need to come back and create all of these tags. So our new level alarm, that's going to be an alarm analog type. Let's go ahead and let that be created. Then we've got our level, and that's going to be an int. We could also make that a real if we wanted to. Let's create it. Then we come over here to our alarm silence. That's a bool. Let's just go ahead and create it. Our disable is a bool. Let's just create it. And our enable is also a bool, and it's created. So now we've actually got the object set up, but we don't have it configured yet, and that's where this thing becomes a little bit more painful. So now that we've got the basics, let's go ahead and jump into that help menu, and let's see what all of our parameters are that we need to set. So if we come in here, there's our structured text. Scroll down and it says we've got another article that has our structured definition. And when we look, we see why. Input parameters, there are tons of them. And output parameters, there are quite a few as well. So there's a ton of stuff that we can configure for one of these analog alarms. That does not mean that we will configure it or that we have to configure it. So again, it's there for us if we need it, but if we don't need it, we don't have to worry about it. Let's go ahead and start setting this up. Enable in enables the alarm, but this thing is already set that way by default, so we don't really have to worry about that. Our input signal is already configured, so we're good on that. Then we look, and here we've got our actual HH enabled. So now we're enabling or disabling our 4 alarm types. Let's go ahead and set those up right here. So we're going to start with LVL underscore ALM dot HH ENABLED colon equals 1, because we want that one to be enabled. And I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it 3 more times. And these 2 in the middle are going to be our highs and lows. So let's go ahead and set those to 0. And I will delete one of those H's, and I'll change these 2 H's to an L. So now we've got our high enabled and our low enabled both set to 0. And this bottom will be our low enabled. And we'll set that equal to 1. Well, just like we're enabling these things, we also know that we need to set limits for those. So let's go ahead and do that as well. I'm going to paste one more time, and instead of this being HH enabled, let's go ahead and change that to HH limit, and we'll set that equal to 90. And just in case we don't want to confuse the program by it thinking that we've got high levels that are lower than high levels, or anything's out of order. So I'm going to go ahead and set limits on our other alarms, even the ones that we're not using. So our low limit will be 10. Our low limit, we'll go ahead and make that something like 20. And our high limit, we'll just make that 80. So now we've got all of our limits in there, and they're all set appropriately. So what else do we need to set in here? We can set our acknowledgement, but I don't think we're going to go that deep into this for right now, because really we're just trying to get you familiar with structured text programming. And We've got our limit set severities we're not going to worry about, but here's one we will. We want to set our minimum duration preset, because what that tells us is that's going to be what kind of alarm delay that we've got. So LVL_ALM dot, and I'm going to paste that in right there, and that's going to be MIN duration PRE. And we're going to set that equal to 5,000, and that's 5,000 milliseconds, which represents a 5-second alarm. And what else have we got? We're going to need to set up a couple of bools for our high alarm and our low alarm. So let's go ahead and knock those out next. And I'll go ahead and call those LL, ALM, EXISTS. That's, kind of arbitrary, but why not, right? And we will set that equal to our LVL_ALM dot, and that's going to be our LLINALARM semicolon. So there we go, and then we're going to need to define that tag. That will be a bool, and we can create it. And then I'm going to copy and paste one more of those right above it, and that's going to be our HH alarm exist, and that's going to correlate with our LL alarm HH in alarm property. So we can go ahead and create that. That's also going to be a bool. And unless I'm forgetting anything, I think we're actually ready to test this. So let's go ahead and download that. Download, good, going. And we can go ahead and get rid of our help menu. And before I run this, something that I want to do is I want to set our level, our LVL property, because right now that's 0, and I want to go ahead and make that something that won't trigger an alarm, so I'll just call that 50. And then we'll go ahead and put this into run mode, and now we're running our program, which should not be creating any alarms. So let's first, before we decide to try to set an alarm, let's set our enable bool to 1. So now we've actually enabled the alarm, and it's set to 50, so we do not have an HH alarm exist, we do not have an LL alarm exist, but let's go ahead and try to create one. So I'm going to set this down to 5, and we should get an LL alarm here in about 5 seconds. Boom, there we go, we've got a 1. So then if we wanted to, we could acknowledge this alarm, reset it, change the condition, and then we could also go back and generate a high alarm. But I think at this point we've adequately demonstrated how this works. I think we've also adequately demonstrated what a pain in the neck it can be to set it all up. And it's real easy to make a mistake along the way so that it doesn't work when the time comes. You really have to rigorously test this. Just one more benefit to the little interfaces that we have with function blocks and such. Or even manually creating these with ladders. They tend to work a whole lot easier, and they're a whole lot simpler to set up. I mean, you just, decide on a bool. That's going to be your alarm, and you control it, trigger it with a one-shot, break it with an interrupt, and you're done. So, there's a nice mechanism here. It's very robust. It certainly gets the job done. And don't ever let anybody tell you that it's not a royal pain, because you would not want to set this, you would not want to set up 200 alarms in a system like this, probably. Just saying. So anyway, that's about all of the initial introduction I'm going to give you to the commands in structured text. Whenever you want to learn how to use those, you're going to have to go to the help menu. There's no way around it. So, that's where you're going to get most of your knowledge, not from me going through and setting all these things up one after another. That alone would be 50 hours. What you're going to do next, you're going to see me set up some loops in structured text, which is where this thing really starts to loop more like common computer programming. And that's where the actual power of structured text is, in my opinion. Not just compatibility between different programming environments, but the ability to run loops. So in the next we will get into loops, and I'll show you how some of those work. And after that, we'll come back and actually try to program something in structured text. So see you then.